Philip Plato wrote to me some time ago, in fact I have his letter here, and has shown a great deal of concern over the years about our environment and what happens. He's the managing director of Plato Estates, which is a property investment and management company, so he knows a thing or two about property. He's a fellow of the Institute of Directors and a chartered planning and development surveyor. And he originally qualified from the College of Estate Management in 1998, and I do like this, he was awarded the Land Securities Prize. But he's a member of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors as well. So his academic and professional credentials are beyond question. He's spoken on various subjects, covering roadside property, town planning, property taxation, and petrol filling stations. And I don't know whether we're going to hear from him at all today about the changes that we are going to have to our petrol filling stations as electric cars and autonomous vehicles are coming online. But I think the shape of our communities and indeed what we build and the infrastructure we build alongside them will change significantly as we phase out fossil fuel cars. And electric cars are coming down the line much quicker, which will contribute, I hope, to improving our environment. He gave evidence to a House of Commons select committee, as all good people do, on the matter of unauthorised roadside development for gypsy and traveller sites that resulted actually in revised guidance going to the local authorities. So I think thank you for that sterling work several years ago now, but a very valuable contribution to the debate. He graduated from the General Motors Institute with a diploma in dealership management in 1979, so he will know a thing or two about those electric cars and what we need. But what he has done is he has initiated and put together a campaign, Brown Not Green, to draw attention to the threats that we face in our community and to our countryside. And for which, can I say on your behalf, a big thank you to him for initiating this organisation. And can I, without further ado, ask him to give us the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, Philip Plato.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Cheryl. I'm blushing a little bit. I should say that as involved as I have been within Brown Not Green, I cannot take all the credit. There is a very hard-working committee of colleagues who have helped me in setting up today's meeting, but also getting Brown Not Green sorted out. And what we have tried to do from the outset was to promote the notion that certainly here in Chesham, and I think it should be a general principle elsewhere, is that brownfield developments should be the first consideration towards trying to meet the housing need that you heard Cheryl describe earlier. And that green belt and green field should be the last consideration. Indeed, green belt the very last of the last. Hence, brown, not green. Although I am the de facto spokesman of Brown Not Green, as I say, I don't want to think of this as a one-man show. There's a very hard-working committee which has now all become directors of Brown Not Green Chesham, and I'll explain all about that later on this morning. Having said what I've said, Chesham does have to play its part in meeting the housing need for this area. It is simply not good enough to say not in our backyard. And there have been, thankfully, only a small number of people who have accused our organisation of being a NIMBY organisation. For those of you who are not familiar with the phrase, that stands for not in my backyard. Nothing could be further from the truth. Brown Not Green acknowledged that there has to be some increased housing in the area. What we contest is the notion that we should start looking at the green belt first. And I will explain more about how I feel about that later on, but I think that should be said from the outset. We feel that the proposal to take 145 acres of green belt from the northeast of the town in order to expand it and provide 900 homes is unsustainable. Basically, we feel it is too much of the wrong type of housing in the wrong place. Now, many of you have made comments on this proposal to the consultation in December last year. And a lot of you have attended smaller gatherings that we in Brown Not Green have hosted over the last 12 months or more. Since then, there has been progress, both by ourselves and by the council, although I should say I am fearful that the progress is of a glacial pace. It does make Brexit look supersonic, frankly. Now, as I say, there's been little news, though, on the Greenbelt issues since many of you made comments over 10 months ago. And we just felt it was about time that somebody brought the community up to date and tried to give you some information as to what was going on and what we were doing. So over the next 25 minutes or so, I hope I can do that. I'm going to try and update you on what Brown Not Green has been doing, where we are in the local plan process. Cheryl has touched on that a little bit earlier. And she's also indicated to you a little bit about what Chiltern and South Bucks are doing, but I hope to also add to that comment. I also need, I think, to explain to everyone, why are we still discussing this issue? If our case is so strong, why has this Greenbelt option at Chesham not already been dropped? And I will try and explain why that is the case. It is frustrating, I know. Many of you who have attended previous meetings will know that I've often referred to this process as more of a marathon than a sprint. And if I may torture that analogy just a little bit more, I would say we're probably about halfway round the course, with the danger of it turning into an ultra-marathon. And unfortunately, the route ahead is still a little bit unclear. I apologise, as I say, for labouring that metaphor a little bit, but I think it does give you a flavour of this process, that it's not a quick thing at all. And we do have to be patient, but we also have to be engaged. I'm going to also try and tell you what we can do from now on to combat this ongoing threat to the Chesham Greenbelt. And in this last respect, ladies and gentlemen, I will be talking about fundraising. Now, I should say from the outset that we're very grateful to have Cheryl here in her capacity both as an MP and the president of the CPRE, Campaign for Protection of Rural England. However, she's not here to endorse our fundraising campaign. I must make that perfectly clear, because obviously her interests have got to be declared, and she has to remain distant from this sort of thing. But I will be talking about what we're doing in terms of fundraising and why. Now, basically, the news today is a little bit mixed. And although we have, I think, presented a very, very solid case and continue to add to it, we are concerned by some of the things that we are still seeing emerging in the Council's evidence base. To summarise and really try and put this into a bit of a soundbite, we are hoping for the best. We do think we've got a good case, but we have to be prepared for the worst. And I'm going to just set the scene a little bit on what's been going on, for the purpose of those of you who perhaps have come to this late, or indeed some of you could be forgiven for having forgotten some of the issues. It's been going on for so long. So apologies to those of you who are really already up to speed, but I do think for the benefit of everyone, I do need to just explain the process and where we are a little bit. As you've already heard, Chiltern and South Bucks have jointly agreed to make a single local plan covering both districts. Now, this has not been done on a whim. They are required by law to prepare a local plan. It's just that they've chosen to do it as a joint plan. And the local plan, Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act, which has now overtaken Section 54A of the Town and Country Planning Act, but it basically means that the local plan has primacy in determining all planning applications. It will determine where development will take place for business, for employment, for recreation, general amenity, and of course housing. And as you've already heard, housing is the big issue. It is unsurprising, therefore, that it has been probably the most publicised part of the local plan process so far. It's a very important document because it also lasts a very long time. These documents will remain valid for at least 20 years. In this case, they put a date of 2036 on it. Frankly, I think because it's been so long getting adopted, it might actually last even longer than that. So we are talking about setting the planning policy for the next generation. It's our children who will ultimately be affected by this and the decisions that are made today. So it is very important, and it's very heartwarming, in fact, to see so many people coming to meetings like this and being engaged. Again, for the benefits of those of you who are new to the issue, I think I should also explain that the process kicked off nearly well, nearly 2 years ago, in fact, with some early evidence base coming out, early evidence, I should say, coming out, and then an issues and options consultation being put out in, when was it, January of last year. Many of you, as I say, made comments on that, although not as many as we would have liked, because we subsequently found that there had not been a great deal of publicity. Many of you did not know about the issue, and it was only later, when a second non-statutory consultation came out about the Green Belt, that I think many of you started to become aware of this. And that's really where Brown Not Green was born. And we make no apology for raising the profile of this matter, because it was very clear to us that a lot of you didn't know what was going on. And I hope that we have raised the profile somewhat. But right from the start, in that first issues and options document, 2 sites were proposed northeast of Chesham. One was a very large site of a couple of hundred hectares proposed for employment land, moving up towards Ashley Green from north of Lye Green Road. The other includes the site that we're going to be talking about mainly today, but also straddling Lye Green Road. And again, it was a similar size, couple of hundred hectares, and that was allocated or proposed for housing. Now, thankfully, after those initial comments, the employment option was dropped, and we got left with a smaller area of Greenbelt under consideration, which I've shown in this slide, bounded by the red line. And it is an area of about 58 hectares, which is just under 145 acres for those of you who still work in old money. And on that area, they were proposing to build 900 homes, of which there would be a certain allocation for gypsies and travellers. There'd also be sheltered housing for elderly. And there were also proposed some amenity facilities, basically a convenience store. And as I've said, many more of you then responded against that proposal. And it is this site that we are still waiting an announcement upon. And it is very frustrating, I know, for all of you, that we're 10 months since that last consultation concluded, and we still don't know whether it's in or out, being modified or what. Now, Brown Not Green, as well as many of you, raised really serious issues about this site. And I'm very glad you did, because if there had been just a groundswell saying, it's affected my view, I don't like it, frankly, that cuts no ice. And I think many of you have come up with some very thoughtful and very serious concerns about this area. Certainly in Brown Not Green, we express concern about the roads not being able to cope. And I don't just mean the roads defined by the red line to the northeast around Lye Green. I'm talking about the roads in the wider part of the town too. This site will generate significantly more traffic, and is evidence of that. If you go into the evidence base for this emerging local plan, you will find a report by Herts County Council in which it is estimated that increased traffic in the town will be increased by 400%. Now, the same report also recognises that the road junctions in Chesham are already at or exceeding their design capacity. And those of us who live and work in the town know that it's not going to be an easy thing to improve those road junctions. There's not like you've got a nice bit of green verge that you can take away and improve the junction. There just isn't the space. So that's a very, very big issue to be concerned about. And of course, more traffic produces more air pollution. Now, Cheryl mentioned how important that is. We are indeed the lungs of London. But due to our topography and the existing traffic that runs through the town, many of you will know that Berkhamsted Road has an air quality assessment on it. It's really bad. So bad, in fact, that when they built the medical centre there, they had to move it back a couple of metres. Now, I ask you, how is that going to be improved if we have such a significant increase in traffic going through the town? It cannot be a good thing. Other infrastructure cannot cope. And I'm talking now about the drainage. I think many of you know about the surface water drainage problems and the sewerage drainage problems. That is a very important consideration too. Development on this site will also result in the loss of high quality agricultural land, and it will threaten wildlife. Now we've been advised by RSPB and the Bucks Wildlife Trust that there are 8 different species of bird wildlife that are habitat at that location that are on the conservation red list. That is another significant concern. For many, many years, certainly for as long as I've been involved in the planning profession, national guidance and the principle has been that brownfield sites should be looked at first. And as I said at the outset, greenfield last and greenbelt the very last of all. It is of some concern, though, that the local authority here has been looking at greenbelt options from the very start. And only about 10 days ago, I received notification of the draft brownfield register. 10 days ago. We've been talking about greenbelt for nearly 2 years. Why has it taken so long for that brownfield register to be published? And it is in a consultation document. If any of you have got any comments on that, the document is available on the council's website, and we at Brown Green will be commenting on it, because having had a look at it, we think there are a few sites they've missed. So this is a very important consideration, and I stress it because we are not a negative organisation. We think that those areas should be looked at first. They could provide the key to unlock this problem. The other concern about this site is that if it is removed from the green belt, it will result in a loss of openness generally. It will be outward sprawl of Chesham that will absorb Lie Green. Lie Green will lose its identity as a community. Loss of openness, urban sprawl, those are the two cornerstones of Greenbelt policy. That, if you look at the Greenbelt documentation, it starts off talking about openness and preventing urban sprawl as being the two most important considerations. Now, the most troubling issue, as I think I said from the outset, is that this site is also unsustainable. What does that mean? It's a rather glib planning term. You often hear politicians talk about it, and everyone sort of nods wisely, but I don't think many people quite understand what it means. Forgive me if I'm sounding a bit patronising, but it is important everyone understands this. Sustainability is about making sure that we don't do anything today that will affect future generations and harm the environment. One of the key considerations about whether a site is sustainable or not is whether it will encourage car usage and whether it is close to alternative methods of transport, mainly public transport. So let's just have a look at that. What I've done here, I've measured using the digital measure on the ProMap app that I use, the distance from the southernmost corner of the site to the underground station in Chesham. And you can see that at its closest, the site at Lie Green is 1.8 kilometres from Chesham Tube Station. It's also a similar distance from the town centre, because you just go a slightly different route. But if we measure from the centre of the site, as really shown by that additional sort of mauve line that I've put into the centre, that's probably a more realistic distance for the aggregate of whatever development's going to take place in there. It's 2.26 kilometres to the tube station, whilst I hasten to add, negotiating a rather steep hill. People aren't going to walk that distance. They're not going to cycle it. If they do, they might have a death wish trying to go up White Hill. We all know what that's like. Now, here's the interesting thing. Generally, sustainable locations are regarded to be 1.5 kilometres or less from modes of public transport, or have a very regular bus service running nearby. Clearly, we don't meet that criteria. And here's the interesting thing, ladies and gentlemen. Chiltern District Council's current adopted policy, the core strategy, states that sustainable locations should be 1.5 kilometres or less. So how can they even begin to start to think that this site is sustainable in planning terms? So after all that recap, I think it's important to just now look at where we are in the process. I've already mentioned that we had this key issue or issues and options consultation, which was completed on 14th of March last year, followed a few months later, well, about 9 months later, with the Greenbelt preferred options, which highlighted this site that I've just described to you. That finished in December. Then we noticed on the council's website, and Cheryl mentioned this, there was due to be an announcement of the final draft local plan. It was due to come out this month or next, but I'm afraid to tell you that it's now been deferred till March or April of next year.
That's good.
Well, Cheryl has indicated some of the reasons why, and it is a very complex matrix because there is what's called a duty to cooperate with neighbouring authorities. Slough and Aylesbury have been the two prominent authorities that Chiltern and South Bucks have had to negotiate with. But there have been other things as well, and I've got to say that there does seem to have been dare I say it, a slight dragging of feet. And this is of concern to us. We've been concerned because we had hoped that the local plan was going to be published later this month and would give us some idea whether that Greenbelt site northeast of Chesham was going to be included or not. The current objective assessed need of housing, as Cheryl has said, is about 7,600 homes. I have to say, I was really surprised, Cheryl, when you mentioned that there could be another 16,000 added to that, because
1,600.
1,600. Oh, I do. That's great. Because I did have a number of 2,000 that had been given to me. But even so, ladies and gentlemen, adding another 2,000 homes to an already objectively assessed need of 7,600, that is significant. And the glacial pace with which things have moved forward in this local authority is of concern, because Cheryl mentioned the new methodology that is coming in. As things stand, if a local plan is well advanced in its process, it can stick with its existing methodology. But after this consultation finishes in November, and I think it may be by the end of November, they have to go to the new methodology. And as we've just heard, that's going to be close to another couple of thousand homes added to it. That, ladies and gentlemen, will be a spectacular own goal by the local authority if that is yes. So, quite what effect this is going to have on the rest of the local plan timetable is unclear. In listening to Cheryl earlier, it does sound very much as though things are going to get pushed back. I've put up the timetable that still appears on the council website, and you can see there they were hoping to make a submission of the draft local plan in March of next year to the Secretary of State. Frankly, I do think that's going to go back. It's very much a personal view, but I can't see it remaining at these same dates. And I think final adoption will probably be sometime in 2019. So that's where the council are. What have we been doing in Brown Not Green? Well, we've continued to lobby our councillors. And I'm very grateful to some of the councillors who I can see in the room here today, because we've had some really positive help. Councillor Mark Shaw at the back there has been extremely helpful to Brown Not Green in providing us with information and giving us advice. I should say to you, ladies and gentlemen, before you sharpen your knives against the local councillors, I have yet to find one district councillor who thinks this proposal northeast of Chesham to develop on the green belt is a good idea. One has to wonder then, why are we still talking about it? We have presented a petition signed by 1,800 of you to Chiltern District Council in January. We've continued to engage with the press and tried to keep them informed of our efforts too. We've also engaged with the Chesham Society and the subsequent Chesham Renaissance Community Interest Company. Now, I must mention them because they have done sterling work in providing an alternative, a very positive alternative, to meeting the housing need in this area. I forgot to bring it with me. I was going to hold up the first draft of their vision, but I commend it to all of you because they have an alternative solution for providing housing in this town. They will be the first to admit it's not a perfect solution and it's not a finished solution, but it does have community involvement. It is focused on providing homes that are on brownfield land, not greenfield land. I think most of it is land already in public ownership too. So it is a viable alternative that will provide many more homes than are being proposed at the site northeast of Cheshire. So for that reason, we see that as a very positive thing. We also think that it's not a blinkered approach. They're not just looking at providing housing. They're looking at providing the right type of housing for the town that will regenerate the high street and reinvigorate this town. That's what our town needs. It's what our children deserve, frankly. And I've long held the view that just finding the nearest flat site where they could stick 900 homes, that's lazy planning. The final thing we've been doing is we've been undertaking research at Land Registry. And I'm very pleased to tell you that we've had some very positive discussions indeed with the principal landowner and farmer there, Mr. Doug Mash. Our research into the land ownership there reveals that there are three main interests. And I've put them here on the map, I've coloured them in, but let me just explain. The area coloured blue and the area coloured green is all owned by the Mash family farm. The area that's coloured, well, what would you call that, sort of pinkish, mauvish, whatever, that is owned by a company registered in Gibraltar who are called Geltec Properties Limited. They've owned the land since 2010. I can't find out who the shareholders are. It's very difficult to do. I presume that's the reason for being registered in Gibraltar. But I have to assume that they are promoting this site and they would like to see it removed from Greenbelt designation. The other interested party is Countryside Properties plc. Now, they don't own any land yet, but they do have an option on the area that I've shaded blue on the slide before you. But the land is still owned by the Mash family farm. Now, I've spoken with Mr. Doug Mash, and he's been very, very open with me, and he's made it clear that he is not prepared to release any land outside of that area shaded blue for housing. Indeed, he's asked me to relay that fact to everybody, and that's why I mention it today. And this is very significant for two reasons. First of all, the 900 homes could not be accommodated on the blue land by itself. It just simply is not possible. But more importantly, in terms of planning policy, when you take land out of the green belt, there must always be a defensible boundary for the for the remaining green belt. Now, Chiltern and South Bucks District Council contend that the roads around this site would form that defensible boundary. They have said that they cannot consider letting half the site go or a bit of the site go, because how do you define it? Where is that defensible boundary? It's literally an arbitrary line that I've shown there on that illustrative plan. Basically, either the whole site has to be removed from Greenbelt designation or none of the site has to be removed. So that's why it's significant. Now, you can imagine that Countryside Properties are fighting hard against this, and they do have considerable resources to argue this point. I should say to you, though, I believe, having spoken with the man, that Mr. Mash is a very honourable person. His family have farmed in this area for over 100 years, and he is very concerned, as we are, about the effects on the infrastructure. That's why he doesn't want to see too much housing. Indeed, I think he is concerned about the density of development that might be taking place. And he's been very open with me, and I have seen emails from him and his advisors to the council making it abundantly clear that he is not prepared to release further areas of land. So you could be forgiven for thinking this would be the end of the matter. I share that view. But it is the fact that we continue to see the local authority talking about this site that gives me concern. Why has it not been dropped? I've raised this point a few times. Why are we still talking about this? If the situation were as clear as I've just described to you, surely it would just be dropped. I believe Mr. Mash is coming under considerable pressure from Countryside Properties, and possibly by the council too. And to illustrate my concerns, I think I should just read to you a short section from pages 45 and 46 of a 105-page report that recently appeared in the council's evidence base. This was produced by some consultants called Wessex Economics, and they have prepared a housing delivery report which was published in August. They reported to the council what I've just reported to you, that the landowner is not willing to release further areas of land. But then they went on to say, it should be noted that local authorities have compulsory purchase powers under section 226 brackets 1 of the Town and Country Planning Act. Local authorities can use CPO powers to achieve objectives in the interests of the proper planning of an area in which the land is situated. So as welcome as Mr. Mash's assurances may be, he may not have the final say in this matter. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, Brown Not Green are concerned that this land is still under threat, and it is the reason why, in the summer of this year, we decided we needed to start a fundraising campaign to ensure that there could be effective legal representation and advice to fight this at the subsequent, what I still call a local plan inquiry, and which is now called an examination in public. And we feel we need to get a barrister on board. To do this, it will involve raising money. We've got an initial target of £20,000 to raise. This will cover the worst case scenario as we see it. It will enable us to get advice from the barrister into the final input that we will eventually make to the draft local plan when it is published. It will also enable us to have funds for that barrister to attend the public inquiry and to make all the arguments that I've just summarised to you in this meeting, and hopefully a lot more. To be able to ask for such donations, we needed a proper system of governance and organisation within Brown Not Green. Many of you have very generously offered to provide money to this cause right from the start, and we've resisted it, purely and simply because we didn't know we were going to need it, and secondly, it wasn't right. It just wasn't right for you to give me money to put into my account that I might use, that I couldn't then answer you, show you a bank statement or whatever. It was just not professional enough. So over the summer, we have created a not-for-profit private company limited by guarantee, which is now called Brown Not Green Chesham Limited. If you go onto our website, you will find copies of the Constitution and our Articles of Association, and you'll find details of all the directors that I work with in Brown Not Green. We've also opened, just moving on to the next slide, we've also opened corporate bank accounts, both with Metro and TSB. At the moment, we're only using the Metro account. This is because we wanted the donations to be ring-fenced. They can't be in private accounts. It's just not appropriate. And I have to say, that process of opening the bank account, that took nearly 8 weeks. We get voted from this. Nobody on the Brown Not Green board or organising committee gets paid. And it is purely a mechanism for us to raise funds to recruit a specialist barrister to represent us if the Lie Green site is still in the final draft local plan. Now, who will this specialist person be? At present, we've not appointed anybody, but we have done a lot of research, but we do also feel that it needs to be a barrister, not a solicitor, not a planning consultant, as we really do feel that we might need someone to be an effective advocate at the inquiry itself. Now, one of the few privileges that I have as a chartered surveyor is I have direct professional access to the bar. I'm not talking about getting a gin and tonic, I'm talking about the Bar Council. It enables me to appoint or to seek a barrister directly without having to go through a solicitor. So that alone will save Brown Not Green several £1,000s, because it's not just the initial brief. The solicitor then has to keep advising the barrister on any updates and doing research for him. And I'm happy to do that role. But it does mean that when I take that responsibility on, I have personal financial responsibility for paying the barrister's fee. Now, there are many fine sets of barristers in the country who do planning work, but frankly, there are only a handful who are regularly reported on the real big headline cases and who have the heavy hitter QCs and barristers. Of these, landmark chambers really do stand out. Many of you might have heard of them. They are very famous. They have a reputation for excellence. I've had several conversations now with their senior clerk, and I've also written a preliminary brief. They have something like 30 Queen's Counsels who, frankly, we couldn't afford. They are really good guys, or ladies, but they do command a very premium price. But they do have over 50 juniors. The term sounds a little bit derogatory, but they are very experienced juniors. Some are regarded as QCs in waiting, and some, as I say, have had many years at the bar practicing and doing high-profile planning work. And indeed, at Landmark Chambers, 60% of their income comes from planning work. So we think somebody in Landmark is going to be the one we'd like to represent us. And as I've mentioned to you, to do so, I will exercise my direct professional access privileges. The fact that I would be personally liable for the fee is something that you may wonder whether that is fair or not. I'm not so much bothered about the fairness, but I am concerned by the fact that the clerk at Landmark has said they would really like to see some evidence of funds being in place. That's not unreasonable. And so we've started the fundraising now, and I hope we won't have to spend a penny of your money, because if this Greenbelt site gets dropped, and we've already heard that there's going to be an announcement in early November, if it gets dropped, our approach will be just to tell the barrister, do nothing, we'll keep you appraised, but we will have to monitor the situation in case there is a last-minute change. But that will not involve any cost at that stage. And if that is the end of it, ladies and gentlemen, all the money raised will be refunded to you. If we have to spend some of the money, though, and we have a success, but there is a substantial residue left, or in fact any residue left, it will be returned on a pro rata basis as well. And that's something that we're very keen to stress in Brown Not Green. There is an alternative that we're also looking at. This is yet to be confirmed, but it's basically crowdfunding for justice. It's called Crowd Justice. You can pledge funds by credit card. Your money will not get taken until a target total has been achieved. However, there is a cost to Brown Not Green, and it's 5%. So we have a slight concern about that. We also have a slight concern about the administration. So please don't take it for granted that this is going to be available yet. I hesitated to include this slide in today's presentation, but if we do get this launched, rest assured there will be an announcement on the BNG website, and there will be an email circular going out as well. But as it does cost us 5%, I have to say I would urge you, if you can, to make donations by cheque or BACS payment now. We've set an initial target of £20,000, which will comfortably cover what we need from the barrister if it does go to an examination in public. Now, we did a soft launch of our fundraising campaign a couple of weeks ago, and I'm delighted to tell you we got off to a great start. All we did was basically email a few friends and hand out a few leaflets to people that we immediately know, but we've already raised over £5,000 in 2 weeks. So we're a quarter of the way there already. Many have made, well, not many, a few have made four-figure donations, which is fantastic, but some have made smaller figures, and that's fine too. The question that I am getting asked, though, is how much should I give? Well, frankly, ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to set a figure. It's a matter for personal conscience and also your personal circumstances. It would be wrong of us to label a figure on that. All I would ask you to consider is, how much do you value your home? How much do you value the environment in which we live and which you want to preserve? And if you've got money in your account, I suspect it might not be earning a great deal of interest. If you can make it available for BNG, we'd be delighted. Hopefully we can return all or most of it in due course. To put it in perspective, though, and give you just a little bit more guidance, if everyone in this room got £200, we've smashed it. That's what it comes down to. It really isn't. It isn't necessarily involving big money. So what happens now? Well, we were hoping that there was going to be the draft local plan published on the 7th of November, and as Cheryl has mentioned, that's now been postponed. But she has also mentioned that we are going to see the publication of a Greenbelt Development Options report to the Council, and that will indicate what strategic sites in the Greenbelt officers are likely to recommend for the emerging local plan. There are a number of potential options for us because I've highlighted in this slide the conditionality behind the announcement that's going to be made on the 7th of November. And you'll see at the bottom there, it's going to be subject to further duty to cooperate and discussions, if relevant, and final evidence-based work. So in other words, even if it's dropped, it could come back in, which is why we've got to monitor it and why we've got to have that barrister lurking in the wings, as it were. I should say that another aspect of having a barrister engaged at an early stage is that if the council should not follow proper procedure, or if evidence is ignored, or if principles of natural justice are offended, we will then be in a prime position to seek judicial review. I hope to God we don't have to do it. It is expensive, it's time consuming, but we have to demonstrate to this council that we are ready and funded to do it if necessary. These are the options that we have, depending on what is announced in November. Now, the ones on the left are, if common sense prevails and our site is not included in the options to go forward, then we will just monitor and we won't need to retain the barrister. But the one on the right is the concern, if it is still carried forward, we need to appoint and instruct and make representations both before the public inquiry and appear at it with the barrister. So, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, yes, the news is rather mixed. We do have a very strong case, though. I must stress that this is not a done deal by any manner of means, and even if our site is still included in the final draft local plan, do not lose heart, because actually I think the problem is the council are distracted. And another benefit of having the barrister is we will help. It is not a negative process, it is a positive one. The council have got so many issues. You've heard about the other interested parties that are lobbying them. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Believe me, there are so many things to be considered. We've got to bring focus for the local authority, and providing a top quality barrister will provide some input that I think the council haven't had so far. But we need your donations to ensure we are represented if necessary. Thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes my presentation. We are going to have some questions. You will know, I have mentioned before, we are filming. We will not be filming the Q&A session because I want any of you to ask questions frankly and not feel that you're on the record. We will do our best to answer them. I would like to just start the process off, if you'll excuse me. I'd just like to start the Q&A by asking a question of our chairman. And it is simply this, that we heard from all the district councillors to say that nobody seems to be thinking that this is a good idea. But one councillor has suggested to me that this is actually all being driven by central government. It's all you lot. That's what the suggestion was. And that it's... and as I can't find anything on the evidence base that suggests central government is saying we must, that the central government requires us to allocate X number of homes in the green belt, anywhere in Chiltern, let alone Cheshire, I just wondered, Cheryl, if you'd like to comment on that rather extraordinary suggestion.
Well, thank you very much, Philip. But first of all, a round of applause. I think an excellent. As they say in the Punch and Judy shows, that's the way to do it. Excellent. Can I just first of all do something that I absolutely must because of my position? I'm not associated with this fundraising appeal at all. I can't be seen to be doing that. I will just tell you what happened in my first years when I was in Parliament. I don't know how many of you remembered, but the National Society for Epilepsy, as it was called then, put in proposals to develop the site at Chalfont St Peter, absolutely enormous overdevelopment for the area. And I was vice president, vice chairman, I think, vice patron, a patron. I had a title anyway. I was associated with the NSE, and I had to resign my position because it was quite obvious that this was not something that the local area could sustain for all these reasons that Philip laid out, whether it was roads, water and sewage, power. I added health services and schools, as well as all the environmental matters. It went to a public inquiry, and against advice, I actually gave evidence to that public inquiry because I had collected similar evidence as to the effect it would have on the environment and on our local population in the area. So I don't want to prejudice my position by being associated with the fundraising, but I'm very pleased to chair it. I just wanted to make it clear. Can I also just say that what you have said is that there is all to play for. We are still not there yet, and that's why it is so important that the community is involved. The question you asked me, there is no diktat coming from central government that says you have to use Greenbelt and you have to build that number of houses. You are the expert, so in fact you do know that. So if anybody is telling you that, that is not the case. But what you do need to do is to reinforce a response to this. And the figures that I have been given, you scared me when you said these figures, and I just checked my figures in my brief.
Sorry if I misheard you.
Yeah. Apparently, we are supposed to find 14,900 houses. If these consultation proposals aren't amended, it's an extra 1,400 that takes us up to 16,300 by the year 2036. So you can divide that by the number of years. I've done it by 2037 divided by 20, so I think it makes sense. But Aylesbury has said at the moment that they will take 5,750 houses, and that is how it stands at the moment. But one of the key things is the brownfield register that
Yes.
you mentioned, and that consultation is open until the 10th of November. And you can nominate additional brownfield sites, and I think it is important that everybody does know that that is the date for the brownfield register consultation, and for people to have a look at the Chiltern District Council site, which I think is really important.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, can I just thank all those people that are sitting on the floor, that have been sitting in the kitchen and queuing out in the hall. Absolutely fantastic turnout. And everybody that has asked a question or made a contribution, thank you to you as well. But on your behalf, can I thank Phillip, Plato, for bringing this presentation to the town and for arranging this meeting. Can I just say that I think we have got some ways forward for the community from here. I am not encouraging you to make financial contributions to BNG, but in a personal capacity, I have to say that I have always believed that development in our community should come from the community itself and from the bottom up. We all want more houses. We all want more places where businesses can open. Certainly, if my surgery is anything to go by, I've had people in my surgeries asking me if I can find them a small premises to start a small business. And we're very short on those as well. And I think that today this is added to the debate, and it's shown that there are ways forward for the community to influence this process still and try and get an outcome which would be really good for this fantastic town, and take it forward not just for our generation but for the generations to come. So on your behalf, a big thank you to Phillip Plato, and thank you for coming today.